Good Wednesday morning, JOX 94.5. Damian Mitchell alongside Conrad Van Order. And for within the first two games of the SEC conference play, we had 6 teams ranked in the top 10 out of the conference. And it didn't even matter which team you put where they were, because last night was the epitome of it just means more. And it was also the epitome of it don't matter where you play, how you play. If you don't come out with a victory, it's going to be difficult to find your footing in the SEC. And also it shows that the SEC is deep as you know what in men's basketball, because we saw the number one team in college basketball, the Tennessee Volunteers, get absolutely boat raced.
I'll be honest, I thought you were going to say something else, and we ended up in the middle.
But either way it happened. They got boat race for sure.
Would have been a lot worse if it had been the other thing.
But that's essentially what happened to them too. After the Florida Gators beat the Tennessee Volunteers by 30. Yes, 73-43 last night. We saw the Kentucky Wildcats as the 6th ranked team in the nation go down to Georgia 82-69. But we did have action here in the state of Alabama as the number 2 team in college basketball. The Auburn Tigers took their talents to Austin, Texas to take on the Texas Longhorns. And I will say this, it was a great ball game. If you got a chance to watch it, it never really felt like Auburn lost control, but it also felt like, okay, we're giving them a little too much comfort right here, especially in the second half. But it just seemed like it felt like too much for Texas to overcome, because they had put themselves in such a hole there in the first half. But Auburn knocks off Texas 87-82 behind 20 points from Janai Broome. He also added in 12 rebounds, just doing what he does best. But when you look at this Auburn team and the way that they played yesterday, now they're going to be the number 1 team in the nation next week. Now, does that add a little bit more pressure because of the fact that they're going to be looked at as the hunted in college basketball? But I think it's something that this team probably embraces of, okay, yeah, we left a lot of change on the table last year after that loss to Yale. So everything that they're doing trending upward as a unit, I think is beneficial for Auburn. And, I mean, no matter what, you're seeing a lot of guys outside of just Janai Broome really embrace the role that they're in, and they're starting to just develop. They kind of know exactly who's going to be on the floor, where they're going to be, and what their role and what their job is, and they're actually playing up. It's almost, I don't want to make it just, I know because the NBA and the NCAA, but it reminds me of when Kawhi Leonard took the Toronto Raptors to the NBA Finals, where they weren't necessarily a bad team without him, but this is how I feel as though Janai Broome's impact has been for this Auburn unit, because of the fact he stayed for another year, and everybody's like, okay, well, we're gonna live and die with number 4, and everybody's game has truly just started to blossom in their role. They know that they can give it to Ford, he can get his, but when you see the resurgence of Denver Jones not afraid to step in and make some tough shots, Chad Baker-Mazara really putting his foot on the gas as far as the offensive side, and then you see Miles Kelly, a guy who's really starting to find himself in this rotation. And it's just everybody's role is starting to develop, and they're embracing it instead of, having any kind of conflict. If they had a conflict, they got it, they handled it before they took the trip to Houston a couple of weeks ago. But now it feels like this Auburn team is really finding out who they are and starting to embrace it right here as we open up SEC play.
Yeah, I mean, Auburn's constructed the way that you would want to construct a college basketball team in today's world, just in the sense of, you have your Tahad Pettiford, your, really nice special freshman guy that can come in and kind of light things up for you at a moment's notice. And then you surround, 1 or 2 younger pieces with a bunch of veteran guys. And, having, the Janai Broomes come back was obviously huge. Him and Mark Sears both for Alabama and Auburn. Those were probably, 2 of the biggest returning players in all of college basketball this season. We've seen the impact, especially that Janai Broomes had, but you brought up a Chad Baker-Mazara, and getting a guy like that to come back Denver Jones, a guy that came out of the transfer portal and really started to kind of turn things on late in the season last year, and he's carried that over to this year. And then you have Miles Kelly, who was great for Auburn last night, going 4 of 6 from deep. And, it's just like this perfect mesh of people that, again, this is something that, it kind of ties into one of the big things we've talked about with college football here recently is if you're Auburn right now, you have done a great job of keeping that team together and having them develop together. And like you said, they've all played together. A lot of them have played together so much now that they can almost read each other's minds, right? Like they just have an understanding. That chemistry they have on the floor is really, really impressive. And so I just think, that goes to Bruce Pearl and Stephen Pearl and the rest of that staff and being able to keep this roster together because, this is kind of like the, what college football teams hope for, I feel like is how, basketball teams like Auburn are constructed where, again, you have a couple of the young guys that come in. Those are very important and basketball, of course, but we've really seen, it feels like the last handful of years, kind of having those veteran guys once it comes tournament time is so key. And having guys that are experienced that aren't going to, freak out when they get into the moment or hit the spotlight. And, I just think that's one of the more impressive things about this Auburn team and the way they're playing right now. You got to go through South Carolina this weekend. Once if you're able to handle that, you're going to be the number 1 team in the country next Monday. So, Bruce Pearl said that, last night was going to be tough. He thought it might even be tougher than the Duke game just from an atmosphere standpoint because, as we know, so many people went to Cameron Indoor for that game because, that's like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity potentially. And now with Texas being in the SEC, maybe not as quite as many Auburn fans making the trip out there for that matchup, but I thought they handled it very, very well. Early on came out hot, went on a run early and kind of built up that lead, and ultimately they're even late when Texas was able to kind of fight back in and Auburn had built a strong enough lead to where, you're able to just hit some free throws and walk out of there. So super impressive win for Auburn. And like you said, I mean, we got some other games to get to here. And this is not a shot at Auburn or any one team in specific. It's just get ready to see whatever team in the SEC you root for probably move around a little bit just because this league is so deep this year.
Absolutely.
And if you look at what a team like a Georgia did last night, you're just going to go, okay, so going to Athens. Okay, that used to be maybe one of those gimme games in the SEC. No, not anymore.
Nope.
Vanderbilt? No, not anymore.
Oh.
Mississippi State? No.
The SEC, man, like it's going to be brutal and it's going to be fun to watch. Now we've reached this point where, of course, we know what the SEC does on the football aspect of things, but I think in basketball now, especially like early on this season, it's like this ain't no joke. And you look at Missouri, who was winless in conference play last year.
They did not. Once it became 2024, they did not win a game from January 1st until the end of the season.
Exactly. And now they're, they beat up on LSU last night, 83-67. Mississippi State, a top 15 team, loses to Vandy. Kentucky. Again, like, we would have thought going into Athens, it's like, oh, yes, Georgia, they're not there yet, but okay, well, now look at 2025. It's like, okay, this ain't the same Georgia team that was on the court last season.
And the Florida team that just beat the crap out of Tennessee last night, who beat them a couple days ago? The Kentucky team that just lost to Georgia last. Yeah, it's gonna be like that.
It's gonna be fun, man. It's gonna be a fun ride. And speaking of Tennessee, I don't think I've ever seen a team shoot as poorly.
Oh, I think that's the worst shooting performance I've ever seen.
Ugh.
It was absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, it looked a little bit better at the end of the game because, Tennessee ultimately hit 12 shots in the game total. But so I took this screenshot with, I think there were 7 minutes left in the game, something about that. But I took this, I put down these stats for Tennessee late in the second half against Florida. I mean, the game was already over at this point. Tennessee was shooting 14% from the floor, 7 for 48, 1 of 24 from behind the three-point line. 1 of 20. We could go out there to hit more than one.
I'm telling you. Like, you're not beating a JV basketball team with those stats.
1 for 20. Yeah, that's all-time bad. And I mean, look, that's, sometimes that's going to happen. You're going to, now, maybe not to that degree, but you're going to have, your off shooting nights. But again, like what Florida did, that is That's the most impressive win, I think, in college basketball this year. Not to
Yeah.
say that maybe you don't look at other teams as, I think they're better than Tennessee and somebody beat them, but you beat the number one team in the country by 30 points.
Yep.
They made 12 shots. Like
For the entire game.
yeah, you're doing something right if you're Florida.
And the thing is, for Florida, it wasn't like you had an absolutely spectacular day as well. They only shot 39%. They went 6 from 20 from the field. They made their free throws 13 of 17, but they out rebounded them 55 to 38. So they're getting extra possessions. They're putting the ball back up. But again, it was just an absolutely abysmal performance from the floor for everybody in a Tennessee uniform. I mean, if you're Rick Barnes, you're just looking like, I don't know who I can put in because ain't nobody making a shot. And to your point, up until that point, they were 1 for 24. They finished 4 for 29 from 3, and they only bumped the field. We're talking about the entire 40 minutes. They were 12 for 56 from the field. That's 21% from anywhere. Just every shot they made. They went 15 for 25 at the free throw line. They left some points out there and still got beat by 30. So if you made, 10 more shots, you're still getting beat by 20. So when you talk about an absolute beatdown down there in the swamp, that's exactly what happened to the number one team in the nation. And again, in the SEC, you just got to all you have to have is one more point than the other team, because if you will take a win in conference play, especially since it started now, you'll just take a dub. It don't matter what it looks like. You just need to make sure you're on the winning side of things.
Well, and here's the crazy thing about, if you, kind of have to rewire your brain now that we're in college basketball season. But if you go back and if you're not familiar with it, in college basketball, it's the quad wins, right? That's what's important, is quad 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if I'm not mistaken, as of right now, if you play a road game in the SEC, it doesn't matter if you're playing the team that's number 1 or the team that's number 16 in the SEC, it is a quad 1 game. If you're playing on the road, and most of them if you're playing at home, because they brought that up during the Auburn game last night, and that's crazy. I mean, it really is. And when you look at, and I know, look, a lot of these non-conference schedules, not all of these teams are playing who Auburn and Alabama just played in their non-conference schedules and going through, some of those gauntlets that they went through early in the season. But I mean, you look at the rankings in the SEC. Or the standings, just in terms of how the conference is, and everybody has 11 or 12 wins already. Like it's not even, I mean, it's ridiculous. Every single team has double digits in the SEC. The worst team, I guess, is South Carolina at 10-4. Everybody else has 11 wins or more. That's crazy.
It's going to be a fun ride. This is what we wanted, though, because again, for all the suffering that we went through during football season of, now, when the teams are losing in bowl games and everybody's like, oh, the SEC is falling off. Well, you can't say that about basketball, because right now it is evident that the SEC is the best conference when it comes to college basketball. And pretty much game in and game out, you have to play your A game or you will be beaten. It's not you may squeak by, you may just get by the skin of your teeth. Nah, big dog, you may be on the opposite end of a Tennessee loss like last night against Florida.
Yeah, I mean, and I just go back and I think about, growing up and watching college hoops and, watching so much. My dad went to Maryland, and so I watched a lot of ACC basketball growing up. And back then, that was the pinnacle, right? When you had, your Dukes and North Carolinas and Syracuse and teams like that. And that was like the peak of college basketball. And I remember watching that and just being like, oh, okay, so, this is just how it is, right? The ACC is kind of going to just run basketball. And then, you even had the Big East back then with UConn and I mean, still with UConn, but, and then you have the Big 12 the last few years with the Kansases and the Houstons. And it's just like, okay, now that's the best conference. And now we get here with the SEC. And again, I, might be a prisoner of the moment. And if I am wrong, I would love for somebody to correct me. But in my lifetime, I feel like this is the best I've ever seen a single conference perform. And I know we still have a long ways to go, but now that we're in conference play and they're just kind of going to beat up on each other, I mean, it's remarkable. I just don't think I've ever seen one conference totally dominate college basketball for this span of time, like I have for the SEC this year. I mean, they've gotten off to the best start I think I've ever seen as a whole conference. It's wild.
And just think about how it looks now, because going back to last season or towards the end of last season, how we saw Calipari make the jump from Kentucky to Arkansas. At this point in the SEC, we're thinking, oh, yeah, Arkansas is going to be right there. And nobody's even really talking about them because of, how they've started. But I think that if Cal can find a way to get it done, they could be right there in the conversation. And they'll be playing tonight as Ole Miss travels to Fayetteville to take on Arkansas. That game at 6 o'clock on ESPN2. Alabama on the road in Columbia, South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. That game at 6 p.m. on the SEC network. And right after that, you've got two ranked opponents between Texas A&M and Oklahoma set to do battle on SEC network right after Alabama and South Carolina. So I'm telling you, man, SEC play, it's here to stay, and it's going to be a fun ride. And now, if you're an Auburn fan, if you're an Auburn basketball fan, do you think you have the best team in the nation right now? Because it seems as though as long as you handle your business, you're going to be in that number one spot. And can you handle the pressure? Do you think this team is well equipped enough to continue this trend? What games are you worried about on the schedule? Probably every SEC game moving forward now that you have to play. But I look at this Auburn team and everybody else in the SEC. I mean, Auburn's probably the deepest roster, and they probably are. They're the most battle tested. They have the deepest roster. They know their identity early on. It's the biggest thing is just can they maintain this the rest of the way? And it'll be interesting to see what Bruce Pearl and this Auburn unit does. But again, we have Alabama tonight, taking on South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma.
Also, quick shout out to the Blazers last night. UAB played Tulane. They knocked off 81-69. Yaxel Lindenborg, 25 points for the Blazers. So a good win there in conference play against the Green Wave. So Auburn UAB win tonight, and same with those Sanford in there as well. And then everyone will be happy, right?
Absolutely. 205-849-4550. We continue with the basketball conversation of just is Auburn the best team in college basketball right now? The floor is yours. We'll take your text message, your calls on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5.
621. 621. Welcome into Morning JOX. Con Mitchell here with you till 7 o'clock. JOX. Con Mitchell here with you till 7 o'clock when we hand you off to McElroy. And Kublik in the morning. Talking a little SEC hoops here. Auburn getting a big win over Texas last night on the road. Florida absolutely dominating Tennessee. We have Alabama on the hardwood tonight as they take on South Carolina. That game is going to tip at 6 o'clock this evening for you. But real quick, have some Alabama football news. Wanted to share with you if you missed it overnight. So we got some good news involving players returning for another year at Alabama. So we found out yesterday, he had kind of announced this, I guess not officially, but when he got injured, he had made it clear that he was planning to come back, and that's Keon Sabb, the safety who transferred over from Michigan this past offseason. Had a really, really nice start to the year, then unfortunately got injured. But he announces yesterday he is coming back for another year with the Crimson Tide. You also have Jaden Roberts, one of the better members of that offensive line. He's coming back for another year, so that's big after Elijah Pritchett, your right tackle, entered the portal, and it looks like he's going to end up at Nebraska now. But they keep Jaden Roberts there in Tuscaloosa. So that is certainly good news there. And then we also know, so last week, I believe, was when Colin Hitchler was fired, the defensive backs coach there, or one of the defensive coaches there at Alabama. And it looks like now that Jason Jones, who has worked at, he's a former Alabama player, but he's most recently worked at North Carolina the last couple of years. He is being targeted to replace Hitchler on the staff. So a little bit of coaching news there, potentially, as well as some good news if you're an Alabama fan, with two key pieces from last year's team coming back and hopefully going to be healthy and ready to go for next year. So some good news for Alabama fans, because I know a lot of them are, petrified that they look at the transfer portal,
right?
And, think that Alabama's going to win 7 games next year. Well, I mean, they might, but I think they'll be okay.
No, but the pieces that you have returning are very valuable pieces. And now you have the building blocks of what the first year was under Kalen DeBoer, and the new regime there on the coaching staff. And then you have, Damani Jackson and Keon Sabb and that secondary coming back. You have Deontay Lawson, Tim Keenan, and LT Overton, those guys. Like, these are important pieces that when they show glimpses this past season of, okay, if they continue to get better in another year in the system, they're going to be just fine. And they're veteran guys who have played a lot of football. So their impact is definitely going to be felt. And I think that's that's motivation. That's motivating to see if you're an Alabama fan of, okay, well, it's not like somebody that's, hasn't been an impact guy. These are guys that have quality snaps, that have played high level football. And when they're on, they're on. So another year in this system for everybody involved is going to be better.
Absolutely. And then on the inverse of that, if you weren't aware, you have a lot of the younger guys. I think the headliner, obviously, Keelan Russell, the 5-star quarterback. A lot of them are now on campus, including Keelan Russell. He moved in on Monday, so already being able to go and get some work, start, getting, be in the locker room, building chemistry with the guys, going and getting that extra work and all that good stuff. So a lot to look forward to. And, of course, I think we're all looking forward to the next transfer portal window, right? That's we all love that.
The old after spring practice.
That's right.
When the coaches start announcing that, hey, you probably, lock in the spring, and if there's greener pastures, you might as well just go ahead and hit the transfer portal, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. As soon as they start announcing depth charts, or you see somebody that has a bad spring, you'll start seeing some names across the board. But that's the college football schedule now. There ain't no telling. So just kind of buckle in, prepare yourself. We had a caller call in. I guess he's been out of the woodworks for a little bit. He asked if Holden Garner was still on the roster. It's like,
he is not.
No. He's gone. He's gone. That whole quarterback room for all.
I was about to say, they are all gone.
They all gone.
They're all gone.
It's a clean sweep. 205-834-9450. Of course, talking about basketball season in the SEC, especially here in the state of Alabama, as Auburn gets a big win over Texas. You have Florida knocking off Tennessee, Georgia knocking off Kentucky. So now it looks as though, as Auburn right now, the question I have for them, are they the best team in the nation? And we're starting to get some reaction here on the JOX text line. Somebody texts in and says, of course, War Damn Eagle, we ready. I hear you. Nick texted in. He says, from top to bottom, Auburn has been the best team in the country all season long. Barring any injuries, I expect a national title this season. War damn Eagle. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
that's what the expectation should be, right? I think minimum you would be looking for a Final Four appearance again.
Yeah.
But I agree with what he said. I think Auburn's been the best team essentially since day one. And my only thing for Auburn is I just hope that people don't forget, because we all fall into the "what have you done late for me lately" camp. And while being in the SEC, they're gonna have a lot of impressive wins, but those games, the game against Houston and some of those early season games that you had, if you're Auburn, I almost feel like some people kind of forget about that because it was, last year. It's like, oh, that was, the early non-conference. They don't play anybody. It's like, no, they actually kind of played a gauntlet. And so I hope that they get that recognition. And like I said, if you beat South Carolina this weekend, you're going to be number one next week.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how this goes. Somebody else takes in and says, as long as Auburn doesn't get anyone hurt on the, as long as Auburn doesn't get anyone hurt on the plane rides, they're going to be tough to beat.
Look, I don't know what was said. That may be one of the best things that happened to this basketball team. Seriously, like at the time, I think we were all like, oh man, this could be really ugly. And it's like, in retrospect, sometimes that's what you need, man. Sometimes you just need to hash it out.
Yeah, exactly. If anybody has grown up in a locker room, not everybody's going to see eye to eye. It's a safe space, but it can get a little reckless at times. It's one of the more it's the closest thing to what we think America should be is a locker room for real, because there's a lot of conversations amongst men that we can never take out to the public, but also there's places where it's like, hey, you become a man. You'll become a man real quick. Politics are out the way.
There's a joke I want to make so bad, but I can't.
Don't do it, because I have a feeling of where you're going to go, Conrad. It's 6:28 in the morning. I already said butt race, so let's.
Yeah, we want to come back tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. We want to keep our jobs. Let's continue to get some reaction on the phone lines. 205-834-9450. Of course, we got to go to War Damn Don about this Auburn unit. What's going on, Don?
Hey, good morning, fellas.
What's happening?
Hey, War Eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but hey, almost gave that one away at the end, didn't we?
Yeah. It made it a little close for comfort.
Kind of interesting.
A win is a win.
Absolutely. Hey, anytime you can win on the road, I'll take it.
Yeah, especially in the SEC this year. That's going to be a common theme here, is just survive and move on.
Yes, they did. Yeah, no, but hey, also Conrad too. A little football news. We got a new coach too. I think he had coached at Auburn before.
Oh yes, you did. His name is escaping me right now. But yes, y'all did add another member to the coaching staff, and as I shared a minute ago, Alabama looking like they're going to bring back a former player. So maybe reunions of sorts for both Alabama and Auburn on the coaching staff a little bit.
That's right. Well, hey. By the way, guys, what kind of team does South Carolina have? I know y'all play them tonight, Conrad.
Yeah, as I was talking about a little bit earlier, they're solid. I think if you look at kind of the SEC as a whole right now, they might be viewed as, I guess if you could say there's maybe a weak link in the conference, it would be South Carolina, just because, they do, have the worst record in the conference right now, but still, it's just watching what a team like a Georgia did last night to a Kentucky. It just makes you go, okay, anytime you have to go on the road in the SEC, it doesn't matter who you're going to play. Look at Mississippi State and Vanderbilt last night. Like, it's going to be difficult regardless. Right. So I think Alabama and Auburn both need to be careful.
Oh, yeah, I got my Auburn jacket on, Conrad, and somebody just said, roll tide to me. I'm doing it.
That's a good man right there.
As Davey knows, I do DoorDash in the mornings, so that's why you hear people talking to me in the background. Sorry about that, guys. Got to make a little extra money. But, hey, anyway, we play South Carolina Saturday ourselves at South Carolina.
Yep, yeah. And if you get through that one, Don, you're going to be the number one team in the country. You just got to, don't let that be a trap game.
Well, I don't really want to get into that. Get into that in January, buddy. It matters where you are in March.
Oh,
Hey,
I know.
remember,
Being number one right now doesn't mean anything, but it's nice.
I will never forget being in Las Vegas last year when we got beat by Yale and everybody being mad at me because I was an Auburn fan and they lost a lot of money on them.
I wasn't mad at you. I kind of
No, I'm talking about all the people I told them that Auburn would beat Yale by 30. Those people wanted to kill me.
Oh, I know. Well, you got to be careful in March, Don. You never know how things are going to go.
Absolutely. Hey, by the way, Conrad, I'm sorry I didn't get to see you yesterday. I hope you had a great birthday the other day, buddy.
I appreciate that, Don. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Well, y'all have a good day, guys.
You as well, man. Let's go to John in T-Town. Wants to talk some Auburn ball with us. What's going on, John?
Good morning, guys. Thing about Auburn is I always get scared when we get number one. The first time we got number one, you had the Chris Davis incident. He signs with an agent in the middle of the tournament. Then the next time we get number one, you get COVID. So, this time I'm looking for an alien invasion or something. That kind of worries me every time we get number one. The toughest schedule so far, and through the whole season, we'll have the toughest schedule. About Auburn, I wish I could have got on before Don. Our blowouts, the leading scorer against us has either been a small forward or if they're a three-guard offense, that swing defense that we did several years ago that we got to the Final Four that kind of got away from the last 2 years. The only thing that we got enough depth to handle one injury to a starter, but two, I think, would kind of hurt us a little bit. Now, hang up, listen, y'all have a great day.
You as well, John.
Yeah, I would agree. That's reality for most teams, right? Especially, it also depends on who the injuries are too, obviously,
Right.
and how big of an impact that would be. Because, if Janai Broome goes down, I certainly think Auburn would still be a tournament team, but I don't think they're going to be viewed as a Final Four contender or a national championship contender if that were to happen. But that's how, again, any team has to kind of deal with that possibility. But yeah, hopefully they're able to stay healthy, and they've done a good job of that so far. I know you had the scare a little early in the year with Janai Broome
Right.
going into the Purdue game, but ultimately, that didn't turn out to be anything big. So yeah, healthy is the name of the game. Your best ability is your availability.
Absolutely. Ask Jimmy Garoppolo. 5834-9450. We'll keep the conversation going. Also take a look as we're a little over 24 hours away from that first semifinal matchup between Penn State and Notre Dame. Trying to get some thoughts on where we stand as far as going into the matchup. Also continue to take a look at SEC hoops. We'll get that with more on the other side. Keep it locked right here on JOX 94.5. 637 here on as well. Our wonderful listeners, 205-834-9450. Your text message, your calls are always welcome. Of course, we have seen that the SEC is dominating in college basketball as we saw the number one team in the nation fall to their conference foes as the Tennessee Volunteers get absolutely boat raced by the Florida Gators, 73-43. Kentucky falls to Georgia in Athens, 82-69. And of course, the Auburn Tigers, the number two team in the nation, they end up defeating Texas 87-82. And if you really watched the game, it felt like Auburn was really in control. Yeah, it got a little closer than you really wanted it to be there on towards the end of the ball game, but you still ended up winning, getting another conference win to start off SEC play. And of course, Alabama hits the floor tonight, take on the South Carolina Gamecocks. Again, that game at 6 p.m. on the SEC network. Ole Miss travels to Arkansas to take on the Razorbacks. That game on ESPN2 at 6 a.m. And Texas A&M and Oklahoma set to do battle at 8 p.m. on the SEC network. And we know that we still have college football on the horizon as the playoffs have reached the semifinals. We still have SEC representation, no matter how you slice it up. Texas is an SEC school. They will be taking on Ohio State on Friday, but tomorrow, 6:30, from the Orange Bowl, we've got Notre Dame and Penn State. GMAC will be on the call for that game, so it'll be fun to see him, do his thing as far as the college football playoff. He's been doing a pretty good job as well. But as we look at this Notre Dame and Penn State matchup, I've been going back and forth of, all right, how much am I really buying stock into what Penn State has done because of who they've played in the playoffs? Or am I truly watching what I've seen in this Notre Dame team of, okay, this is a completely different unit than the team that lost to Northern Illinois early in the regular season? Because ever since then, they've done nothing but turn up. And it's been a physical approach. Marcus Freeman, he's a defensive guy, played linebacker back in the day, and this team has really taken his identity of, we're going to be sound on the defensive side, and on offensively, we're going to run the ball. Our quarterback, we don't need you to go out here and throw for 800 yards. Just be smart, be efficient. We're not asking you to do too much. And if anything, Riley Leonard has done exactly what they needed Sam Hartman to do last season and just not turn the ball over. And that's something that he's done during this playoff run, and also the utilization of his legs. I think his legs are going to be the X factor for Notre Dame offensively because, okay, maybe Jeremiah Love may not be 100%. So you've got to be able to find answers to the puzzle, I guess you would say. Kind of like Georgia Tech with Haynes King at the quarterback position. It's, all right, when we call your number, just know it's on you. Like we're kind of, we're surveying the offense, we're surveying the defense, and saying just take what they give you. Don't have to feel like you need to do the spectaculars. Just do what you need to do to keep your job afloat. And defensively, they're going to handle their business. Because, again, you go back and watch that Georgia matchup, they were flying around the football. They were causing havoc. I know Brock Vandagriff was making his first start, so they probably ramped up the pressure a good bit. But they got home, too. And Georgia didn't have a run game. Now, Penn State, they have a two-headed monster in the backfield, so you're going to have to pick your spots and pick your poison of just being strong enough in the run game. So when you do decide to apply pressure to Drew Aller, you're going to rush those decision-making processes. And as we've seen, not really this season because he has played, exceptionally well for Penn State, but he's known to turn the ball over in times of situations. So, how do you figure out how to neutralize the offensive weapons for Penn State, but also try to play almost like a time possession game of, we just need to make sure we maintain drives and end with not just with field goals, but touchdowns in the end.
Yeah. I think first off, I do think that both of these teams are legit. Like I've become a believer this year in this year's edition of both Penn State and Notre Dame, because, I think for a lot of us, it's hard. It was hard to buy into either one of these programs just because recent history tells us that these are the kinds of teams that, okay, they can take advantage of a schedule, go and win 10 games, and then when they have to play, a quote-unquote real team, they don't show up. And we've now seen them, be able to answer that call. And so I do think that these are both very good teams, and I think that's going to lead us into a very good and a very physical matchup tomorrow. Again, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and what you're talking about with Notre Dame and forcing pressure on Drew Aller, I think that could ultimately be, kind of the key factor in the game. Because again, I go back to some of the games you had for Notre Dame later in the season where you won the games, but against a not very good USC team. I mean, you're giving up over 300 yards passing. You go back even to the last week against Georgia, where if you weren't playing the no hands team of wide receivers at Georgia, I mean, there were plenty of opportunities for guys to come down with passes and I mean, explosive plays as well. So, if you're Penn State and you can get Drew Aller going and you can get him to move the ball down the field quickly and get him confident, I think that's going to be the best path to success for you because, again, that's kind of what we've seen for Notre Dame, right? They're really good against the run, but they're a little bit more susceptible on the back end. So if you're Penn State and you're able to take advantage of that, as you have been able to do in the past few games that you've played, Tyler Warren's going to be a big part of that, obviously, for Penn State. I think that's the best path for you. And then conversely, though, if you're Penn State, you got to keep your quarterback upright, right?
Yep.
And I do think another aspect of his game that, he's not Riley Leonard, but he has a little wiggle to him, right? Like he can make some things happen with his legs a little bit there as well. And that's certainly a benefit to you. And then on the other side for Notre Dame, it's just, can you continue to do what you've done the last two games, right? Which is just physically impose your will. You physically dominated Indiana. You physically dominated Georgia, which, as we talked about, don't really see that happen very often. And, I think it's just, if you're Notre Dame, you have found your identity. Your identity is running the football and Riley Leonard not turning the ball over and, taking opportune pass attempts when they're there, but mostly sticking with the run game with Jeremiah Love and with Riley Leonard on the ground and some of those other backs. And if they're able to continue to do that, I mean, Notre Dame is going to be a tough out. Like they are. They're just physical. They have the dudes. Maybe for the first time in a while, they have the dudes to match up with the SEC and the Big Ten. And, I do. I think it's going to be a great game, but it's still just, a day out. It's hard for me not to look at Notre Dame and the physicality that they play with and think that, man, if that caused problems for Georgia, I get it was a backup quarterback, but I feel like, even going back to that Penn State-Ohio State game where defensively, Ohio State just essentially willed their way to victory, right? You had 2 goal line stands in that game, and that's not an easy thing to do. I'm not saying that's necessarily what Notre Dame's going to have to do, but they have really impressed me with their physicality. Both teams have, but I still think Notre Dame just defensively, man, they're got some bad dudes out there.
They do.
And they're doing it without Riley Mills, who led the team in sacks.
Yep.
And that was the same thing for Georgia as well. It's wild.
I'm telling you, man, it's going to be interesting to see, and I think it's going to be an exciting matchup. And, of course, the Cotton Bowl on Friday night between Texas and Ohio State.
If you can get there through the foot of snow.
Yeah.
It's going to be – I was talking with McLaren yesterday, and
they're preparing for the worst.
They're not really looking forward to it. It's going to be rough in Dallas.
It will be. 205-834-9450. Let's go to Frank, who wants to talk college football playoff games with us. What's going on, Frank?
Hello?
You there, Frank?
Yeah, you there?
Yes, sir. It's Frank Lynchburg. First off, I'd like to say I love this country. My grandfather fought for this country. And on the 20th, a great Donald J. Trump is going to be in office. But back to this game. I'm from the days of the old Joe Paterno, and Nick Singleton, he's going to run all over him. I think that I look at and I think that boy on the other side, old Jeremiah Love, he's all right, but that boy, he's not that good. He's not that good. I think Penn State's going to run all over these boys, and just old Notre Dame, like I tell them, try that in a small town.
We got you, big dog. We got you. He's hey, Nick Singleton was born on January 6th.
Oh,
okay. Hey, listen, is it final score Friday? Because I feel like we should have asked him for a score prediction. Because it's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, they got 2 running backs that both can go for 100 and some yards if given an opportunity.
Both teams.
But the correlation of his breakdown, I said, whoa.
All right. Well, I'm glad that him being born on January 6th is
I love it. I love it. Boy, this has been a fun morning, Jocks morning.
It's been interesting. Things have been said.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Jocks 94.5. Man, I hadn't heard this in a long time. Little J, man, we've reached unk status. Like we some OGs. Like this is prime middle school. Like you feeling yourself. Mitchell alongside Conrad Van Order here with you for a few more moments as we get you set for McElroy and Kublik in the morning. Coming up at the top of the hour. Just taking a look at the college football playoff. We had a caller call in and say that he thinks Penn State is going to absolutely beat the brakes off of Notre Dame. And I don't know, man. I think that the run game for Penn State is valuable. What they have in Tyler Warren, he is a mismatch for anybody that's guarding him. But I don't know, man. This Notre Dame defense has just really really turned it on as of late in the college football playoff. And again, it's not like Penn State hadn't handled their business as well. But when I look at who they've gone against, I felt like Penn State was the better team in both matchups anyway, with SMU and with Boise State. But for Notre Dame to do what they did to Georgia, it just really kind of just shook my foundation of just like, okay, now I've said that this Notre Dame team looks different. Now they really are different because they went out there and they were a more physical team. Can that continue? Because again, like this would be, and granted, I'm not gonna say that, Boise State didn't really hit Penn State in the mouth, but this is going to be smash mouth, the modern era version of old school football, where they're going to be running the ball. There's going to be emphasis on running the ball, winning in between the tackles. But it's just, I think for what Notre Dame has done, they're riding a pretty good wave of momentum, and it feels as though they play with a little extra chip on their shoulder because they're trying to rewrite the narrative of, oh, it's just Notre Dame in the college football playoff. We've seen how this usually goes.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right about that, and I just think they're a team on a mission now, and I think the benefit that they have that Penn State doesn't have is, I mean, I think we all know Penn State had a pretty easy, as far as playoff paths go, you got a pretty good draw, right? Whereas Notre Dame, I think doing what they did to Georgia, I mean, that has to inspire a lot of confidence in what you do, right? Because it's one thing to do that to Indiana, but then you get to do that to a team that's won, 2 out of the last 3 national championships. That'll get your juices flowing a little bit. And I think for Notre Dame, just having the confidence of, oh man, I mean, if we can physically dominate Georgia, then who is Penn State? Yeah, we can go in there and handle that no problem. And so it's kind of almost like a been there, done that kind of thing for Notre Dame. But again, I'll tell you, and I feel like this game potentially can come down to who can make an explosive play in the passing game, who can get it's just one of those momentum type plays, whether it's a Penn State and then a Notre Dame going, oh crap, we can't do that. Or it's Riley Leonard kind of coming out of nowhere